thank you to all of you who are participating in this conversation on soil health. I'm honored and delighted to welcome you on behalf of the OCP group. As you all know, soil health is a subject that is literally at the foundation of agriculture, food security, and mitigating climate change. I mean, it's hard to think of a subject that is more central to the challenges we're facing at the moment. We've got an enormously interesting and impressive set of panelists. I'm deeply grateful for to all of them for taking the time out of their busy schedules to lead this conversation. And thank you all for being here. And Essen, back to you, my friend.
It is our hope that today's session will demonstrate that soil health is fundamental, as Carrie said, for human existence and is the basis for food production. Without healthy soils, we will not have healthy food production. And it is within this context that this event will discuss the vital relationship between soil health and the Sustainable Development Goals, like the SDG number 1, which is no poverty, SDG number 2, zero hunger, and SDG 15, life on land in particular. So we look forward to hearing from our distinguished panelists and to have a productive discussion.
I'd like to make a statement that the world at present, humanity, is in grip of 3 C's. And those 3 C's are COVID, conflict, and climate change. And although it may sound rather presumptuous, but to get rid of these 3 C's, soil health is something that we cannot ignore. The Green Revolution, let's say from 1961 to 2020, the population increased by a factor of 2.5, but the cereal production increased by a factor of 3.3. Consequently, the per capita cereal production increased 32% to 376 kilograms. And this was the miracle of the Green Revolution, made possible by intensive input of fertilizers, which went up 9.2 times, phosphorus and potassium went up 5 times, pesticides, tremendous increase, also 5.2 times, irrigation area 2.5 times. And those intensive input, of course, had a tremendous impact on the environment. Climate, for example, the pre-agriculture, the carbon stock in atmosphere was 360 gigaton. Pre-industrial revolution time around 750, it was 560 gigaton. At present, it's 880 gigaton. And total emission from fossil fuel, all those in 1750 are 575 gigaton. Emission from agriculture, are 575 gigaton. Emission from fossil fuel, 445 gigaton. So emission from land use change in agriculture have to be put back somehow to the land where they came from. And that's a part which is very important in soil health management. The goal number 2, the food security issue, in fact, is being aggravated by COVID and conflict, both. And even until 2030, the total food insecurity, hunger will increase globally, definitely in Africa, but may decrease but not eliminate in South Asia. Therefore, this 21st century Green Revolution should really be soil health based, soil resilience based, so that the eco-efficiency of the input, I mentioned fertilizer, pesticide, irrigation, can be improved, so we can have a lower dependence on those inputs, and through science-based innovation. That brings us to the question of strategies to transform the food systems. Right now, the food systems have been characterized by depleting the resources, degrading resources, destroying some environment, discarding and dominating, taking land from nature. If we can transform these to 5R instead, reduce, reuse, recycle, regenerate, and restore to improve soil health, so that we can return some land back to nature. And my hope is that by 2100, we perhaps should return half of the land currently under agriculture back to nature by improving soil health through, for example, regenerative agriculture. What is it? It's something which is inspired by eco-innovation. It's powered by non-carbon energy. It's driven by circular economy and green infrastructure. It's supported by the recarbonization of the terrestrial biosphere. That's the essence of it. Putting carbon back in the terrestrial. Remember 545 gigaton that I mentioned in the beginning. And the eco-intensification means producing more from less by improving soil health, so that we produce more from less land, less water, less fertilizer and pesticide, less energy, and less emission of greenhouse gases, and yet return land back to nature through sustainable soil management. And the principles of sustainable soil management are: replace what is removed, respond wisely to what is changed, and predict what may happen from anthropogenic and natural perturbations. We should think about carbon-based fertilization. OCP, this discussion is very pertinent to this idea. Rather than focusing on NPK, we should be focusing on CNPK, so that the carbon put back in the land will decrease the need for more fertilizer by improving efficiency and reducing leakage into the environment. The technical potential of carbon sequestration of the world through health improvement, restoration, is about 2.5 gigaton of carbon per year. And the total technical potential between now and 2100 in soil is about 180 gigaton, in vegetation about 155, total about 157 parts per million of drawdown of atmospheric CO2. While we are increasing carbon in soil by 1 metric ton per hectare, for the same input of fertilizer, the yield of corn can be increased by 100 to 300 kilogram, soybean 20 to 50, wheat 20 to 70, rice, sorghum, all crops, because we are improving the efficiency. If we can improve the carbon stock by 10 ton, that means the productivity can be increased by 400 to 1,000 kilogram per hectare, everything else remaining the same. There's a need for soil policy. Global soil at the moment is a resource commons. There is an international soil policy vacuum. Therefore, this discussion is very important. Soil science must be connected with business leaders, policymakers, and general public. And there is a need for multi-generational effort to enhance awareness about the importance of soil health and create an international soil policy. In the US, for example, we have a Clean Air Act, we have a Clean Water Act. There is no Healthy Soil Act. I hope the next Farm Bill will pay a considerable attention to this idea. Sustainable soil management is not only for human part, it should also consider non-human in environment which improve livable condition. Soil health approaches may not always improve economic yield, but have other co-benefits. Therefore, the economic gains would be better with better soil health. Soil health management must connect science with business leaders, policymakers, and general public.
What do we have to do to get the countries interested and recognize the importance of soils?
Create awareness through dialogue with policymakers. That is really very important. So the policymakers can help us translate science into action. I mentioned the case of US not having Soil Health Act. UN FAO in particular had a soil resolution, but the soil resolution, unless it's acted upon, it cannot solve the issue. Soil degradation is a serious issue globally. Yeah. 1/3 of land is degraded, and involving farmers in this process, especially the resource poor farmers, is very important.
I would start by saying, without increasing agricultural productivity, Africa will struggle to feed itself, even with land area expansion. And the study very recently from McKinsey showed that about 70% of the food should be coming from sustainable intensification. The professor said eco-intensification, really producing more per unit of land and labor. And this is not happening everywhere in Africa. Africa has multiple climates, multiple soils. So, the different farming systems in the continent, have also different potential in terms of production productivity. So, the ecology and the soils, along with food habits, has created variable farming systems in the continent. And that is also highly related to soil characteristics and soil health. And we know that, in the continent, unlike in many other continents, there is very limited use of inputs, partly because of limited availability and access, partly because there is no market incentive for people to apply it, and partly because it is also, there's a lack of knowledge in terms of farmers, and all that is really reducing the productivity potential, aggravating land degradation, exposing people to climate risks. All that is leading to vulnerability and poverty. So all that, creates what we call, a spiral. People keep opening up new land. In the first years, they get yield. In the second year, they may get yield. Yield will be reduced over time. The income will be reduced over time and end up in poverty. So unless we manage our soils, the probability of continuing production in the same land will be close to nil. And in Agra, there was this concern continental in Africa that, farmers are not using fertilizers. So there was an attempt to bring in, more input in the system over the last 20 years. But you see that, there's an increased number of farmers using fertilizers. There is also an increased importation of fertilizers. But if you see what's happening in the continent, the average fertilizer is still less than 20 kg per hectare. So it's not even satisfying the crop removal. And that is really aggravating and continually degrading the system. It is now even getting worse because of increased fertilizer price, aggravated by the current Russian conflicts. Now we are talking about really efficient use of inputs. So appreciating soil variability, but also making sure that, we are targeting to locations and systems where we get the highest responses. And Africa, as I said, is diverse. Even countries are very diverse. So the type of nutrient required and the type of response we are getting also varies from countries to countries and from regions within the country. So soil mapping is becoming one, strategies that Agra has been promoting. And also, even within a landscape, you could see high variability in terms of crop responses. So in the hillsides, you get very limited response, whatever you apply. And in the foot slopes, that's where you get responses. So related to soil depth, related to soil water, related to management. And that is the type of approach we are following, trying to get, targeted interventions. And we are getting really data showing that, the foot slopes, particularly if you apply higher amount of fertilizers, you'll get higher yields, but in the other hill slopes and degraded areas, you get very little out of it. And one area, which we have been promoting in the continent is about concentration, about microdosing. It's an old intervention, but still relevant for Africa in terms of improving productivity, but also reducing cost. And we know that mineral fertilizer alone is not a solution. If you see the long-term experiments in Africa, in West Africa, in the Sahel, but also in Kenya, you see that you get responses from fertilizers, you get response from crop residues better than control where you don't apply anything. But regardless of the season, you get higher yields, increasing yield from combination. So that's what we're saying, organic and now leading towards the regenerative practices is going to be a solution. And that has been also true in Kenya in long-term experiments. And one challenge we're facing in the continent is even high potential areas where you have a lot of rainfall. The system is becoming degraded because of soil acidity. And it decreases the nutrient efficiency. So what we're trying to bring in is really concepts like, bringing liming into the system, but also, bringing agroforestry systems so that you can rehabilitate the system, bringing more carbon at the same time improves the nutrient efficiency of systems. And now talking about really regeneration, as the professor has mentioned, we have seen, that whenever you have cover crops, in between seasons, in between cropping seasons, you increase the nutrient efficiency, reduce your fertilizer cost, but also improve the soil carbon and improve the soil water holding capacity, reducing the risk of drought. And all that, is not only useful for crop productivity, but also our work together with Nottingham University show that, depending on where you live in Africa, your nutrient status, the grain quality is dictated. So really bringing in the right blends, the right nutrients in the system is helping not only crop productivity, also nutrition in the system. And we are trying in AGRA to bring in the different partners, acting, be it from the donor side, but also from the technology side. And what we're trying to do is really adding value and proposition, mainly by supporting local institutions, develop site-specific blends, integrating the fertilizer, issue into the broader food system, but also, addressing the last mile delivery in terms of extension, in terms of agro dealers, aggregators, and integrating some of these practices into the policy arena by creating state capacity and strengthening government coordination. That's really where we are investing most of our time in terms of really soil health. Agro has a very strong recurrent strengthening the extension system, particularly in Africa, where you have very few extensionists and where the farmer extension ratio is very high. So by acting on farmer level interventions together with our partners through digital agronomic content, through but also developing scalable models and creating capacity of agro dealers and bringing in new products in the system. So really working at different skills to influence the system towards leading towards soil health. And that, of course, is in the version of communication, trying to really bring in evidences for people, for governments to introduce some of the best practices into their planning processes, but also co-invest in critical inputs.
I know you referred to many problems in Africa, the soil mining and the use of very small use of fertilizers. But and we keep hearing that Africa is going to become the world food basket. Can you please tell us what role will innovation play to improve the health of Africa's soil?
As latecomers in this area, we are learning from the green revolution, from the bads and the goods. And what we're trying to do in Africa to produce more food, and what AGRA is also trying to do, is to help farmers, bring in innovations to help farmers to understand their systems first. Really, what is happening where? What are the challenges? And what do we do where? So if they have a biomass of certain amount, where do they really best apply? How do you minimize erosion? How do you bring in innovations into the system? So really digital solutions in terms of mapping farms and landscapes. I will see also, helping to farmers to understand and monitor plant health so that they know what is missing, they know what to apply into the system. We'd like to see also, the last mile delivery access to technology and practices. So a simplified extension content, but also a reach in the remote areas with appropriate and context-based solutions. But also really, bringing in the new concepts of carbon farming, linking farmers with potential, carbon buyers, the voluntary markets, so that farmers have incentives to invest on their landscapes and systems. But also, reducing dependency. What we see in this year is most countries didn't have even fertilizers, didn't they have some resources to buy it. So, how do we really create that capacity in the continent? There are materials, there are ingredients that can be converted into products. So, be it in the infrastructure, in improved trading among countries, is very, very important. And most importantly, really integrating soil health into the bigger food systems, agenda.
Yeah.
Be it coming from the climate change perspective, from recycling nutrients and water, having closed systems, but also, operating beyond farms, linking farms with landscapes, and making sure that really, there's a shared risk when farmers are trying to do whatever they are doing. And that all cannot be solved only by soil. We need to bring in irrigation, we need to bring the right varieties, we need to bring in also capacity to do it. So all these, I think, are ingredients for us to produce more food and support ourselves in the continent, but also contribute to the global agenda.
So just before jumping into really soil, the healthy soils or the health of soils, I'd just like to remind us like how important soils are to us, to our lives. So soils, they are this very thin layer on the Earth's crust, which is actually a very active interface connecting rocks, water, organisms, atmosphere. And this very active thin layer in the Earth's crust, it takes thousands of years to be formed, only a few centimeters. So it's actually a non-renewable resource in a human lifetime. And this very thin layer provides us a lot of the function of this thin layer, provides us a lot of what we call the ecosystem services, like Professor Ratanlal said. So it holds twice more carbon than with what we have in the atmosphere. Soils, they filtrate the water we consume. It holds the water, stores the water, avoid floodings. Soil is the source of our food. Almost everything that we eat comes from the soils. So all these ecosystem services make soils vital to us, even though we might not be aware. If we not have all these ecosystem services, we would not be here discussing these issues today. So one way or another, healthy soils themselves, they are related to pretty much all of the SDGs. But particularly today, with the SDGs 15, 1 and 2, life on land, no poverty and zero hunger, soils are very much important and connected to all the three of them. So when it's rightly said and brought by Professor Ratanlal and Dr. Tillage, so it's no news that Africa has still a huge problem with hunger, hidden hunger. It's still a big problem. And as it was already said, so with Africa is the place where population is growing the most. So we're going to have, Africa is going to be doubling its population in the next coming decades. So you take this already stressed ecosystem and then you bring even more people in it. So you have, if nothing is done, you would have even worse problems with hunger. And then you take this system, you bring more people, and then these people trying to produce more food, like Dr. Tillage said, what they are actually doing, they are just damaging the environment. And then we have this looming crisis across the whole continent, which is we are losing fertile land, we are losing our soils, we are degrading the environment. And actually, if you see all these things, they fit into what we call a vicious cycle of hunger, poverty, and environment degradation. So people going hunger, then more people coming to divide, split the food, and they try to produce, they degrade the environment. Less land to produce food, more hunger, more people. So we feed this vicious cycle of hunger, poverty, and land degradation. And then these were the findings that we had throughout most of last year. I was glad to work with Professor Daniel Naun on preparing this policy paper that should guide how Europe and Africa they are going to relate in terms of research and innovation for the green transition in Africa. So this policy paper, the link should be on the chat now. This policy paper was produced and launched this year in February 2022 during the AU-EU summit. And then again, this vicious cycle of poverty, hunger, and degradation, those were part of the findings that we had during our discussions throughout most of 2021 with African Union commissioners and stakeholders, European Union commissioners and stakeholders. Of course, we have many things that Africa needs in order to unleash the green transition. including sanitation, irrigation, green energy, electricity infrastructure, and many things. But soils, healthy soils, securing our soils is at the core of the green transition in Africa. Because healthy soils, in order to secure them, we need to develop these sustainable agricultural systems and food systems that we are talking here. So once we do that, soils is actually the big connector of all these major societal challenges. If we can secure our soils, then we ensure food security, water security, energy security, biodiversity, climate change abatement, and all the other ecosystem service that we are looking for, and that would unleash this green transition in Africa. And then just so we're talking about soil health, and then everybody's looking for it, but then how to measure, how to push for soil health. If we want to push for healthier soils, we have to measure it. But then there's a big discussion even among the scientists. Most of them, they even don't agree with each other. So it's an evolving concept that we are working more and more. Of course, it's getting clearer and clearer. But now I have two examples of how these major policies, they are pushing for soil health. And one of them is the Horizon Europe program. It has 5 missions, and one of these missions is dedicated to soils, which is caring for soils, caring for life. And it wants to ensure that 75% of the soils of Europe, they are safe, they are healthy by 2030. And then they list these 6 indicators in order to measure what we have as soil health. If you go to the USA, the USDA, they have some similar indicators, even some other ones related to measuring different capabilities of the soil, but they also bring some nice things, which are the principles of soil health. What we should be doing, what this sustainable agricultural system should be doing in order to push for soil health, which is to minimize disturbance, to maximize biodiversity, maximize soil cover, and maximize living roots in the soil. So soil health at the end, it's just as we can see the soil as a living organism, allowing us to have healthy plants, healthy people, and healthy ecosystems. But everything that we are saying here, we are measuring indicators, capabilities. So now we have to take from that and build how we can evaluate the health of a soil. But if I can draw a parallel line with human health, I think this discussion will never end. We will always be discussing, because to define health, it's actually very hard. If I take only this definition of health, human health, by the Britannic Encyclopedia, health in humans is the extent of an individual continuum physical, emotional, mental ability to cope with his or her environment, which is only one of the many definitions possible for human health. And then it's clear said that physical condition, it's different from health. You can have someone that is in a very bad shape, but might have some mental problems, depression, which they're not healthy at all. And then it's very much well aligned with what we discussed regarding soils, because as for people, it's very easy to spot that unhealthy people. It's very easy. They have symptoms, they have disease. So we look at them, we see this person is not healthy. And this is the same with the soil. If we look at this soil, which is a major problem all around Africa, mainly sub-Saharan Africa, like Dr. Tillage said, we can clearly see that this is it's not a healthy soil, because we see all this erosion going on. But so it's easy to spot an unhealthy soil and unhealthy people, but to say that some soil or people that are healthy, it's a rather nebulous condition and somewhat difficult to define, especially if you want to compare 2 people or 2 soils, which one is healthier than the other one. So I think it's a concept in evolution we're going to keep discussing. The more we understand the complexity of soils, the mechanisms, the reactions, and we bring new technology to evaluate the soils, the more we're going to improve the way we are dealing and pushing for soil health. But just talking about this particular problem, which is very common all around Africa, as Dr. Tillage brought some very good examples. So this is the initiation of the cycle of poverty, hunger, and land degradation in Africa. Why? Because as he said, so people try to start to produce food, they remove more and more nutrients up to a point that this soil, already very poor soil, it doesn't have the capabilities anymore to produce biomass. So now he's not protected anymore. So the wind comes, water comes, and we start to have this land degradation all around Africa. So if we can solve this problem, we are ready to start to unleash this green revolution and to break this cycle of poverty, hunger, and degradation in Africa. And then as all around the tropics, what it's commonly found around the tropics, we find literally like usually very deep soils. They can reach hundreds of meters of depth because they are the oldest soils that we have on Earth. These soils, because of all the leaching process throughout the millions of years of formation, these soils are very poor, as Dr. Tillahum said. So soil fertility is very low. Usually we don't have nutrients, and then we have lots of toxic elements left behind, like aluminum. So if we don't correct this profile chemically, this is what we see. So root systems, they don't develop well in these soils. So then we have weak systems. Then plants don't have root, they cannot absorb water and nutrients. But if we bring the right amendments, and some of them Tillahum said it was like the organic ones, once we improve the chemical conditions of the subsoil profiling, then we bring root systems. Root systems grow in these soils, they absorb more water, absorb more nutrients, we bring nutrients use efficiency, water use efficiency. This more root system produce more biomass above ground, more production, more food, more income, more biomass, more protection of the soil. So we break the cycle of poverty, now we create a virtuous cycle of food, income, green jobs, and protection of the environment. Once we do this, example from Brazil, sugarcane after 4 years, same NPK use, but with different amendments being able to increase the soil profiling characteristics. After 4 years, 5 tons per hectare of carbon saved in the soil. 80% of this carbon down to the 40 to 100 centimeters. Very stabilized carbon in the soil. So we produce more, we have more food, more income, and we store more carbon in the soil. Because if there is one indicator, and Professor Ratton already said, if there is one indicator that we should measure, that we should try to correlate with soil health, is soil organic carbon. So once we break this cycle of this poverty, hunger, and degradation, we can build this more sustainable agricultural systems that we are looking for. So what we are doing at UM6P, so this is part of the work that we are doing there, all these things that I already showed. So we are a rather young university, only 6 years old, but we are driven by African challenge. So our mission is to bring development to the whole continent based on science and technology. So we are based in rational management of natural resource, sustainable industrialization, agile public policies, and human capital development. We are a full-fledged university. We have many different things, but most of our work relates somehow to soil health in order to improve the use of our natural resource in Africa. So we have many projects regarding soil acidity in Africa, non-responsive soils, improving land, doing mapping of the soils, different countries, and then using different technologies. On the top of that, all these science that we are generating, we have a huge tool that we are hoping to deploy all around Africa, which are the 10 to 14 experimental farms, which we already have 2, one here in Morocco, the second one in Ivory Coast is already ready, and the third one to be started now in Ghana. And then we should have all these experimental farms around Africa to cover different climatic and soil conditions that we can use to translate the science we generate into really management practice with the farmers and really work as lighthouses to deploy this knowledge all around the continent. And then besides many other things, we are already running out of time, but besides many other initiatives that we have here, UM6P is also the headquarters of APNI, the African Plant Nutrition Institute, as the name says. So they're focused on plant nutrition, plant health. But because they're based on the One Health approach, so they know that to ensure plant health, they also need soil health. Soil health to bring plant health, human health, and ecosystem health. And APNI also have different offices in Africa, not only here in Morocco, but also Ivory Coast and Kenya. And just last year, they had worked in more than 11 countries in Africa. They have deployed over 14,000 field trials and given more than 300 field programs and trainings around the continent.
It's been really, I'm always inspired when I have the opportunity to listen to our speakers like Dr. Lal, Dr. Almeida, and Dr. Vergoots. The level of work and academic research and knowledge that's going into the work we need to do to invest in our soils is something I think most people are actually not aware of. And what we then do is lift the work, build the understanding, and translate that into actions that business can take. I'm going to be really pleased to share a little bit of what it looks like as we convert some of this information into action. Just very quickly, for those who may not be familiar with WBCSD, we are a global platform of leading businesses really working on the types of transformation that shift big sectors, big economic sectors along their entire value chains. This gives you just a sense of the members that we have working together collectively for high impact, high ambition action. We're just so pleased to have OCP as one of our leading members working in this space alongside us and many others to drive the type of action that we've just been hearing is so necessary. WBCSD prioritizes with our members, not just the actions that are going to transform and operationalize sustainability, including action on healthy soils into business operations and value chains. It does it in a way that makes sure that business is clear on the actions that they need to take in the face of the climate emergency, the rapid loss of nature, and the significant rise in inequity. Each of our speakers, and Dr. Lal, you started us off talking about the fact that this is only getting more challenging in the face of COVID, now in the face of rising conflict. We were already facing escalating food security crises. Now with the war in Ukraine, that has accelerated even further to the extent the UN has engaged a global crisis response team to focus on the intersected issues of food, energy, and finance to respond to these global challenges. And we're really pleased to be working there to understand, again, the role of business in taking action. These three things are linked because there's over 800 million people who don't have enough food. This is accelerating, like I said, and we know the nutritional needs of that food are not distributed fairly or equitably. And the food system itself is very reliant on these three natural issues and very reliant on resilient supply chains, both investing in the right areas and providing equity across. And there's a lot of work to still be done in this space, but there's also a key piece that soil plays that too few people still understand. And I'm really grateful that the speakers we've had today have gotten into the science of it. When we started as WBCSD to lift the science of that into the business case, to talk about why the fact that soil health is such a critical driver of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, to talk about why we cannot achieve a 1.5 degree world without healthy soils, and the fact that with 33% of soils globally degraded, we have to take urgent action. That business case development that we did back in 2018 remains one of the most frequently downloaded publications that we've put together, which is actually quite remarkable because it drives that business case for investing in soil health. We developed that then further into why it's so important to invest, because it's one thing for businesses that rely on agricultural production to understand the importance and the value of soil health and investments into it. It's another for the finance sector to make those connections and understand why it's so critical. So by publishing a soil investment guidance report, that helped to start to create a pull. It created a focus on why agricultural commodity price volatility is so damaging, what the risks are to the business sector. It does have an impact on margins at the farm level, all the way through at every stop, of course, on that value chain. And that loss of fertility, the loss of livelihoods, the stress of water means that there has to be adaptation at every stage. Farmers feel the brunt of this every single day. Businesses are trying to make an understanding of what they can do to take meaningful action. So this type of investment report, the guidance that was provided, building the business case, these were steps to understand at the business level why action needed to be taken, why investment was so critical, and what needed to be done. That then led to several types of very specific actions, one of them being the development of the Soil Investment Hub. This is a really interesting space where businesses across sectors, across value chains, across regions are coming together to develop what are the linkages all the way back, engaging with farmers, driving value chain collaboration that mobilize finance into the types of practices that preserve and restore soil health. It developed a lot of actions that really sent a signal first and foremost around what's necessary, began to identify what the bar for leadership looks like for businesses who are engaging across their value chains, and set a common trajectory for what it means to credibly and consistently invest in soil health. And that's the type of information that credit markets and investors are also looking at, because they understand the risk to business models for the big impacts of climate and soil degradation on the resilience of companies, as well as that full ag production value chain. So through the Soil Investment Hub, tools and solutions are being created that can be scaled. Advocacy is key. We heard about this already. It's so important to raise this visibility and awareness to policymakers. And by showing the types of actions that businesses are taking across value chains, it gives courage to, in some cases, to policymakers to understand that this kind of change is not only possible, but eagerly needed. There's a lot that goes into knowledge sharing. You know, corporate investment programs learn from each other on how to create the right types of engagements, how to drive other stakeholders for engagement, how to engage with communities and community leaders. All of that starts to build common gaps. That starts to fill, common gaps, bridging these things and building bridges to really understand how we get to it. And much like the types of conversations that OCP and Emerging Ag are doing here, starting to create dialogues on what does it take to actually scale this into collective action. These are an example of the multi-stakeholder levels of engagement into the Soil Investment Hub. So you can see, obviously, there's a large number of companies across numerous value chains, particularly the food and agriculture, but not only. But equally, you know, cannot be done by any one sector. It really creates this space and this need to be working together. So it shows you the other types of organizations who are in partnership working together to create these kinds of transformational investment opportunities, practice guides, investment strategies, and criteria to drive the transformation, engaging all the way back to farm. And just a note of the funders who are so involved in this work with us as well. It's really critical that we have them as part of this journey. It's not just that as an example, though. I've got two more if I've got time. And one is a platform called One Planet Business for Biodiversity. This was created off of the French government's leading One Planet initiatives. And it brings together companies across agricultural value chains, again, who are interested in investing in business initiatives on biodiversity in particular, as it relates to agriculture. We know that climate is a much better recognized challenge. Certainly the science at this point is much more robust. We're so grateful for the science underway that we've been hearing about that will start to set the same level of knowledge, consistency, and standards for the transformation that's needed. By working on that and looking at how soil health supports biodiversity and how farm level practices can enhance landscape biodiversity preservation, these companies are working together with investors and other partners to figure out what it means to actually transform agricultural models. This is where regenerative agriculture comes in. And, you know, it is challenging not having a standard methodology and understanding of what regenerative agriculture is, but we know that it requires multiple tools, multiple methods, and we have to look at the outcomes. What are the outputs? What are the results coming from these practices? And it takes that kind of result to also achieve product diversification and ensure investments are going into high value ecosystems. The last point I'll raise, that this gives you a sense, just quickly, of who's involved in One Planet Business for Biodiversity. So you can see both the types of companies, the types of financial partners, the data solution providers, and other knowledge partners who are really engaging and investing, quite frankly, into this work at a landscape specific level, working with farmers on what it takes to transform and then also pull a more diverse group of products into these supply chains and into the types of product portfolios that end up at shelf. The last point I'd like to make is a project that's called the Natural Climate Solutions Alliance. This is around helping investors, again, understand what does it take to invest in soil carbon in particular, but that it isn't sufficient to just invest in soil carbon if we're not taking into consideration biodiversity benefit and community and farmer and livelihood benefit. It is absolutely necessary that all three of those things are considered when looking to invest in the right types of natural climate solutions, the nature-based solutions, frankly, that soil agroforestry and other types of farm level practice and boundaries can help to participate in and support and deliver against. So we're working very much in partnership, again, in this space, to make sure we're driving the types of investment criteria, the type of guidelines, and the types of things that understand how do you not just extract credits, but really invest into carbon across these value chains. So it's my pleasure to have been able to share with you a couple of this very specific actions. It's just a few to share the translation from what we're doing in science through to what it takes to actually mobilize business and drive that kind of consistency for what we actually need to see.
You have been to climate meetings. I mean, how can we get member states to pass a resolution about soil health?
We have a very important opportunity, of course, coming up in Egypt for COP27, and we're already engaging into COP28 the following year in the UAE. We know that there's going to be focus on agriculture and adaptation, and it's into that conversation this year that we want this to come. By the end of this month, we'll have had meetings in Egypt with many of the ministers engaged in developing this, again, to say what can partnership and support bring in. This is one of the things, Essen, that we want to bring into that conversation so that we can show how important it is that policy backs up the action that is needed. That will carry us forward into actually the biodiversity COP taking place now in Montreal in December, and into the big global events, including the global stocktake of COP28 next year.
In 2010, FAO members recognized that soils constitute the foundation for food and a healthy planet. And the Global Soil Partnership, or GSP as we call it shortly, was created by FAO members in 2012 as an interactive, responsive, and voluntary partnership open to governments, institutions, and other stakeholders at various levels. The GSP aims to promote sustainable soil management and to improve the governance of the world's soil resources. The GSP has become a world's leading voice in raising awareness on soil and advocating for a more sustainable management of soil resources that limits soil degradation and maximizes the potential of soils as the provider of ecosystem services. So, how is the GSP working? The GSP supports sustainable soil management through different actions. First, through raising awareness about the importance of healthy soils, through the providing information on the status of soils and the root causes of soil threats, through channeling information and knowledge through soil technical networks, and through planning and implementing sustainable soil management and developing knowledge products. For example, connecting soil data and countries together on a mission to map global soil, for example, bolstering knowledge through spatial data, infrastructure, soil organic carbon map, the salt affected soil maps, soil organic carbon sequestration potential map, black soils, many different maps and tools and information, which is based on information provided by the countries themselves. Then also to support the monitoring, reporting, and verifying the sustainable soil management, and strengthening and building capacities in the countries and institutions, so there have been capacity development programs on soil related that reached over 7,000 national experts from more than 170 countries, and technical webinars gathered more than 30,000 people in the last years. And on top, also we're working on the ground through a program which is called the Soil Doctors. So different, as you can see here, many publications, pioneering publications have been developed, getting to the root causes of the soil threats, technical, different, I'm not going to mention them all now. So basically, the Global Soil Partnership Action Framework looks into healthy soils for a healthy life and environment. So the world, as already mentioned, is facing global challenges as climate change, biodiversity loss, land degradation, food insecurity, malnutrition, pollution, and water scarcity. And soil health and halting soil degradation is the solution and contributes to achieving the SDGs, as already was mentioned as well. The GSP works through a big network of focal points, partners, regional and national soil partnerships, and the GSP Secretariat through the Healthy Soil Facility. And GSP promotes healthy soils through 6 actions. action areas like manage sustainable and restore soils on the provision of ecosystem services, strengthen soil governance, promote knowledge and literacy on soils, promote awareness raising on advocacy on soil health, assess, map, and monitor soil health in a harmonized way, and foster technical cooperation, including gender and youth. It also promotes healthy soil through different actions, which I will mention here. There are too many actions, but for example, capacity building, fertilizer code, the sustainable soil management protocols, for soil day. So these are the different actions which are implemented by the Global Soil Partnership. And always it is based on a sound scientific knowledge, working with ITPS and through somatic soil symposia, global assessment reports, the status of world soil resources report, and also the ITPS soil letters. And it tackles the different threats of soil. The symposia, some of the symposia which were held in the last year since 2017 are the Global Symposium on Soil Organic Carbon, on soil biodiversity in 2021, on soil pollution, soil erosion, biodiversity, affected soil, salt-affected soils, and this year was the soils for nutrition. So these are the last big global symposia which took place. And normally these events successfully bring together research bodies, decision makers, extension services, end users, communities, donors, and relevant UN agencies and international organizations to turn theory into concrete implementation plans and actions. Here it's a bit on showing how health contribute to the different SDGs. So we said already they're fundamental to meet objectives of the UN SDGs, but also the 3 conventions on biodiversity, climate change, and desertification, as just mentioned before, and there's the Foundation for Life on Earth. They're under increasing threat, and it's important to work on these different issues like flood regulation, climate regulation, foundation and human infrastructure. So through the sustainable soils and healthy soils, we contribute to all these different actions or different issues like provision of food, fiber, and fuel, habitat for organisms, carbon sequestration, which addresses 3 very important SDGs, nutrient cycling, water purification and soil contamination reduction, source of pharmaceuticals and genetic resources. Some of them have already been mentioned by the previous speakers. Not going to go into details because time is very short.
Yes.
So the GSP is therefore a unique favorable position to ensure soil awareness and the effective adoption of sustainable soil management worldwide through capacity building, exchange of experiences, as well as the generation and updating of soil information to enable informed decision making. So it has worked with, has 194 farm member nations and 2 associate members and 1 member organization, the European Union. It works with 168 national focal points that work at national level and are appointed directly by FAO members. It has over 500 global soil partnership partners. They're working all over the world, ranging from academia, NGOs, CSOs, soil institutes, private companies. We were mentioned on the last presentation as well. And also we're working with a wide range of experts contributing with the technical knowledge to ad hoc working groups and technical networks. So how does the GSP work? It is an intergovernmental setting and has become an internationally recognized mechanism composed of all farm members. We have 197 countries and over 500 partners. And since 2013, the plenary assembly is the decision-making body of the Global Soil Partnership. So the countries, all countries, member countries of FAO decide and embraces all the GSP partners and farm members in a yearly meeting to review and prioritize the actions. And this year, the GSP celebrates its 10th anniversary and revises its action framework to move from a consolidation phase to a phase of action at the local and national level. It is also discussing the possible institutionalization to become a formal and binding body of FAO to ensure that improved soil governance is implemented by all countries. So this is right now going on. So coming to the World Soil Day, actually mandated was given to FAO by the United Nations General Assembly through its GSP to implement both resolutions, the International Year of Soils and the World Soil Day. They're unique opportunities to convey the message on the importance of soils And through the International Year of Soils and the World Soil Day celebrations, more than 4,000 people have been addressed. Social media reached about 1.23 billion people. The media outreach was on almost 4 billion people. So there are different prizes which are given in this event. So that's a big public which has been gaining awareness about the importance of soil through this different International Year of Soil and also through the World Soil Day. Actually, the last year, since 2016, the different topics of the soil days were soils and pulses, symbiosis for life, caring for the planet, be a solution for soil pollution, stop erosion, keep soils alive, hold soil salinization. So there's been the different topics of the World Soil Day. And actually the last one was hold soil salinization, boost soil productivity. It had like 15 billion users hit the articles, and materials were translated into 27 languages in the countries. And okay, we reached a lot of people through the World Soil Day events on the 5th of December.
There's an interesting question to Dr. Lal. Let me read the question. It is Mr. Graham has asked you about the damage done by intensive tillage and what can be done to reduce that tillage.
Tillage plowing certainly increases vulnerability of soil to erosion, definitely, both water and wind. It increases mineralization of organic matter. It breaks down aggregates. It decomposes organic matter content very rapidly. It had adverse effects on habitat of biodiversity. So tillage is believed to be the major reason for doing it was weed control. And since we have now many other methods of weed control, the role of tillage as a weed control is certainly not any important. So we are hoping that at present 200 million hectares are under no-till conservation agriculture globally, cropland, and hope that the entire cropland within next 20, 30 years or so, or hopefully sooner, can be under no-till agriculture. There are no justification for plowing. It has too many disadvantages. It destroys soil health, not improves it.
This is a question for Dr. Lal, and you gave a figure of 2.5 billion tons of carbon per year as a sequestration potential for in soils globally. I'm aware of a number of other publications. Some of them give a higher number, some of them give a lower, but an interesting one that came out just pointed out that, you know, there is a photosynthetic limitation to the amount of carbon the earth can produce. And it questions whether the current agricultural land can support enough photosynthesis to produce the amount of carbon that would sequester that amount that would be sequestered in soil ultimately. And I think that's a particularly pertinent question given your emphasis on fertilization, not only with NPK, but also CPK. And for African soils in particular, which are low in carbon, can we envision sufficient carbon being produced on those lands, or do we need to envision the transfer of carbon from other ecosystems, other regions, other countries in order to attain that level of soil sequestration?
You're concerned that photosynthesis is not enough to provide 2.5 gigaton potential of carbon sequestration. My estimate of gross primary productivity is 123 gigaton of carbon per year. Mm-hmm. Of course, this 123, 60 is returned immediately by plant respiration, and 63 or so is transferred into land. And then out of 63, managing 2.5 is not a very large number. So I don't think that matches the statistics that you are concerned with. If we can manage 123 gigaton of carbon that plant photosynthesize globally every year, I think the future of climate change is definitely in our hand. So that is the reason that photosynthesis of 123 gigaton, if somehow can be managed so that more is retained in the land as ecosystem productivity. That is the basis of carbon sequestration. Does soils of Africa have enough production biomass? Of course, if you're talking about Sahel, no, but other regions certainly. Transferring from elsewhere is probably not a feasible option. And transferring carbon from elsewhere is also not sequestration, by the way. That's the redistribution. Sequestration happens only when photosynthesis on a given land is preserved within that land to increase soil carbon stock or transferring from one land to another land. It's like robbing Peter and pay Paul. It's not really an additional gain. Can soils of Africa become more productive? Absolutely, yes. The carbon concentration in the soils can be definitely improved. And at the moment, even in China and India and elsewhere in Asia, the nitrogen use efficiency may be 30%, 35%. Even in the US, perhaps 50%. And I do not know any industry where 50% of the investment goes down the drain and cause a lot of damage and still be productive. How can we expect agriculture to be that productive if 60, 70, 50, 80% of the inputs we make in fertilizers get leaked into the environment? So improving efficiency through organic matter content is a high priority, and we have potential biomass productivity to do that.
Considering the fact that land is very, very important to Africa, as we heard from the second panelist, invariably, soil is fundamental and indispensable for the implementation of the SDGs within planetary boundaries, whether from the point of view of agriculture, as we heard from many of the speakers, climate mitigation and adaptation, and as host of biodiversity. The point I want to make, just two of them, because it was certainly a delight for me to listen to Professor Lal. I've been reading all his work all along. Sustainable management of soil is key to attaining a land degradation neutral world, which is one of the 169 targets of the SDGs, but not much attention is focused on it. Science invariably has proven that the cost of restoration or rehabilitation far exceeds the cost of sustainable management. So we are all in for sustainable management. What are we doing at the African Union? That's just the few insights which I want to give. The first point to try to answer the question, how do we move forward? Which is the question which the moderator posed to Dr. Lal. First and foremost, I think we need science-based standards which are legally binding. They need to be established, taking into account both soil health or the quality. The second requirement moving forward is that while framework exists, at least in several African countries, the major challenge is poor implementation. So to solve that problem, we need competent authorities. I think FAO is already helping several countries in that respect. The third requirement is that we need to raise the awareness of farmers, especially the smallholder farmers in Africa. And certainly this is where I think extension service will be of help. To round up, information has been a very, very crucial challenge, as we heard from one of the speakers. So we need more investment in soil information, how to boost them so that we can make more meaningful solutions, which is why we need a science innovation. Finally, we should not ignore the role of indigenous knowledge, which is often neglected. They have a lot that we can tap on. Considering the fact that soil is very, very important to Africa, the last point I want to make is for many of you that have been following developments in Africa. In 2006, we had the African Fertilizer Summit. Considering now that we think that soil is very, very crucial, we are planning at the African Union Commission for the second summit, but this time it will be Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit in the second half of 2023, which invariably, I'm sure, will involve many of you and answer very many of these questions.
Africa should really aim to have a green revolution. Will it be different than Europe's?
Soil carbon sequestration in Africa is not that easy. We have a lot of challenge in terms of getting enough biomass because of the competing needs. You know, it is a source of energy. A lot of cooking is happening there using biomass. You know, it's a livestock feed, and usually the manure is not going to the soil. Then you have the soil issues. So, you know, if you really go to the farms of an average African farmer, whatever that farmer produces may fertilize probably 10% of the farm. And usually it is at the expense of other fields. So there's a lot of nutrient movement. So what do we do in those fields which are the source of the nutrients? That's really where I think the combination of NPK with C comes in. So critical inputs are really important if we want to increase biomass in the system to move towards really regenerative and carbon-rich soils. So that's really the bottom line for us. Even if we apply fertilizers now, of course, fertilizer is not responsive because of depletion. Again, that depletion is aggravated by erosion and other management issues. When it comes to the comment of Professor, I'm very much aware, I'm engaged, in fact, in the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Preparation. We have a committee working group. But the issue is, you know, the Abuja target of moving an average fertilizers from where it was to 50 kg by 2025 was not achieved. It is not achieved. It's not really probably the fertilizer which is achieved or not, but the soil health is getting degraded. Inputs are not really reaching to farmers. So this summit, I think, is timely, is becoming timely because it's combining now fertilizer with the bigger soil health issues. So with the land management issues, with the regenerative issues, with the agroecology issues, and linking it to food systems. So it's going to be a very interesting issue. But I think most importantly from his notes, you know, still, you know, knowledge is available. We know how to do it, but that knowledge is not reaching the farmers. It's not reaching where it should be. That is requiring investment, requiring really a policy and making sure that, you know, we have food on the soil in the farms to reach farmers. That's what really AGRA is trying to do. The green reversion question, I just wanted to say that our institution AGRA is not a copy of the 1960s green revolution. As I said at the beginning, we have positive lessons, we have negative lessons. And the types of resources we have, you know, be it in irrigation investment, be it in pumping, you know, fertilizers into the system, they are not there in Africa, even if you want. So what we're really trying to do is making sure that we bring in the best of what's available, including the current knowledge, and making sure that we ensure farmers produce enough food, but at the same time manage their resources, their land-based resources. So how do you do that? Of course, it's about a combination of good seed, you know, targeted fertilizer, good management, best agronomic management, but also, you know, facilitating farmer innovation. At the same time, you know, protecting the environment from all the negative consequences. So it's a different type of green wash we are talking about. Thank you.
Now I would like to turn to Leonardus and ask him if he has any comments to Tom's and Dr. Lal's remarks. And maybe he can wrap it up with a question that came up. It's about the solution trials and also one on use of infrared and other distance technologies. What is the role of each on soil health?
The solution to the smallholder farmers and everything we're discussing here to soil health in Africa. Very quickly, I think that the first thing, it's really we have to also teach these smallholder farmers that they must be the entrepreneurs of themselves, of their lives. So just when they have this entrepreneur mind, they're going to be able to adopt the technology that they are coming. And then I always like to give the example of Brazil, where I come from. If we take Brazil in the 70s, we were in the same spot as Africa is. We were importing food before. And then we had this huge transformation, which was based in science and technology. And then we had like Embrapa was created. And then we have all these technologies being translated from the universities, institutions to the field, and then helping farmers to bring seeds, bring technologies, farming practices, and all these things to ensure a better productivity. And then now we are producing all the food that we have today. So, but in terms of the technologies, these technologies for me, again, they are very important nowadays. Even so, we just came back from the European synchrotron facility in France, in Grenoble. So we were using synchrotron radiation to study soils. So, and then it's a very fancy technology, spectroscopic technology, big machines. So these machines, they come to help us to understand more better these the mechanisms controlling the soil. So when we understand these mechanisms, then it's as we were discussing. So soil health is an evolution. So we are keeping evolving and then discussing and improving more. The more we understand the soils and the more techniques we have to evaluate it, so the better we're going to be able to push for the soil health. So in this sense, I think these techniques, they're wonderful. But if you take all of them nowadays, I think sometimes they make more confusion with the farmers than sometimes they help. So I think we also have to identify which ones are really useful. Many of them, they are very important for management. So they help a lot the farmer to manage to understand better the climate, their soils and everything. But I think we just have to align them as well. But again, I'm a user of all these modern techniques, and then I truly believe on them. But it's just a matter of really showing the farmers what they need to do and how these technologies can help us. They can help them, because I think mostly maybe in the US and elsewhere. So you can go to the farms and now you see a bunch of sensors everywhere, but they're not doing much. So it's really like what information they're going to bring and how we can use this information to push for healthier and more sustainable agriculture systems that are going to allow us to bring better, healthy soils.
I'm not the person who leads this program, but I can tell you that definitely the kind of tools have been used and in methods for modeling and for mapping, and also there is also a group in working within the GSP that is working on specific work on how you call it, spectroscopy. I don't know how you say it in English. Spectroscopy in English. And also we have also another program, not within the GSP, but within the Land and Water Division. We've got the geospatial unit, and we've got also a group working on water. And in the group working on water, there was a model, a tool developed, which is called BAPOR, which is a publicly accessible near real-time database using satellite data that allows monitoring of agricultural water productivity. So basically it looks into how the plants are using the water using satellite imagery. I wouldn't be able to tell you which is the best tool to be used, but it's being used within the Global Soil Partnership for different purposes.
What is, in very short time, I'm sorry to say, what is your action to call? What would you do?
We have to work on this together. We have to link the science to the policy action, to the business action. We have to create understanding of how critically important it is that we urgently move this up the global agenda. We're working on this. We know that everybody else here who OCP and Emerging Ag have brought together is as well, but there's always more that we can do. So lean in, let's sort out what we can do, and let's move together.
Great, thank you very much. And I would like to thank all of our participants, all of our very honorable panelists for this very extensive discussion on soil. What I have learned, that I knew that soils were very important, but I now know that we have to cherish them. They are very precious, and we have to work public and private sector all together to make everybody to understand that soils are important for our planet and for food security. I also would like to underline that we should work with produce more with less, because we have a lot of people to feed on the planet. We have to know how to do or produce more food by doing or using less. So I would like to thank again for all of our panelists and all of our participants to join us on the Cultivating conversations arranged by OCP. And thank you, and have a good evening or good afternoon to all of you. Thank you.